So I'd first of all like to welcome the amazing and wonderful Phil Ponella to our space. I'm going to share a screen here to show you what he looks like in a picture as well as what he looks like on video. Phil is one of the most innovative people I think I know, certainly in the Jacob School of Music in terms of where we've been going and what we've been doing as a school. For how many years? Uh, 12,
Closer to
15,
14, I think now.
14 years. 14
Yeah.
years he's been part of the leadership of the Jacob School of Music, taking us through very changing times. He currently is, well, as he's the Wennerstrom-Phillips director of the music library, and he's also head of the Jacob School of Music IT team, director of IT at the Jacob School of Music, and is an important figure on campus, leading the music librarianship course, and then also at the Luddy School, I believe it is, right? And then also teaches bibliography, music bibliography. So Phil he's going to talk a little bit about his life, talk a little bit about what he has found on the way through his explorations of his own career, specifically related to innovation, and then give us an idea of what the Jacob School of Music might be doing, and so on and so forth. So I don't want to get too heavily involved in what we're going to be talking about, except to simply mention that we're living in a dramatically changing world. I think it's almost an understatement to suggest that the world is changing around us, especially now with COVID-19 and everything else that's happening. But this has been happening for some time, and certainly through the 20th century going into the 21st century, there's been sort of disruption happening on so many different levels, culturally, technologically, societal, and music has tried to keep a pace of those changes. And the music world that we occupy here in the Jacob School of Music is a small part of that, and yet a really, really important part of that. The thing that strikes me most about what's really going on in the world that we're living in is that we are connected to a sort of simultaneous changes and disruptions that are happening in just about every area of our life. And so thinking about 21st century life and how it sort of reverse connects to the world of music, I think is a lot of where innovation is happening. And one of the most important aspects of those changes is, as we all well know, technology and digital happenings around us. And Phil, being head of IT and head of the music library, very innovative music library in the Jacob School of Music, has a lot to say and has experienced a lot in that regard. So let us go ahead and welcome Phil. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just welcome Phil as part of our conversation today. And Phil, the floor is yours. I was wondering maybe you could just start by talking about where you come from in terms of your own history and how you got this sort of innovation bug going in your life.
Sure, thanks. And thanks for having me. And please, we're a small enough group, even if it was a larger group, I'd say, don't, I'm not giving you a formal presentation. I prefer, and I hope that's okay with Alan, this is a conversation, and you should interrupt and, don't worry about any formalities here. If you have questions or if I'm going off in a direction that you're bored with, tell me, and that's fine. So I kind of chuckle though when, thank you for the nice introduction, Alan, when I'm described as being innovative. And I have this running joke with my wife because she did a master's degree in creativity and innovation. And I'm one of those people who says, well, I'm not really all that creative. And I've come to learn that, creativity and innovation takes on a lot of different flavors. And so, there are subtle ways that you realize, oh, well, that was kind of innovative, wasn't it? How did that come to be? And so, I mean, the one thing that I would emphasize today that, and if Jeff Nelson were here, I would kind of point him out about, his fearless thing. And one of the things I think that inhibits us all a lot is this notion of we can't release this good idea until we've figured it out and we've written the white paper and we've perfected it. And then by the time you get around to doing it, especially in the technology sphere, it's too late, right? I mean, somebody's either done it or they're 3 steps past it already. Amazon or Apple or Google has done it 10 times better. So I think there's this notion of you need to be not so afraid that, yeah, you'll do things that may be failures, and that's okay. And that's how we best learn from those mistakes and move forward. So, I mean, I think about innovation where I started. I don't know, how far back you want me to go, but I was a clarinet major initially. I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in clarinet performance, and I was thinking about, so what did I ever do that was innovative? And the first thing that I could remember, just to get us started, was I was the manager of the wind ensemble, and I used this computer. If you can see my screen, I'm assuming you are seeing it. Yeah. Um,
Amazing. I remember that
uh,
one.
yeah. I mean, they were just starting though, and I'll date myself. This was 1985 or six, right? So I was the manager, and there was a computer lab that had some of these that were just new. And my predecessor had the person I took over from, of course, used a typewriter. I know most of you can't even imagine what that is like, but we had these things called typewriters where you put paper in and you struck the keys and things happen. But I was able to get like the rosters and the rehearsal schedules and the programs I had to type up. I was able to actually save them on a floppy disk that fit into one of those drives. And so, I was like, yeah, well, that was kind of innovative at the time. Took a little bit of figuring out instead of practicing the clarinet. I'm going to stop my sharing now. Um, but it's so those little things do make a difference, and so I think I want to encourage everyone not to overlook small innovation. Sometimes leads to big innovation, and you should be prepared for that. I always refer to a guy who I worked for in Rochester. The dean of the College of Arts and Sciences was a computer scientist, and he used to talk about an article that came out in Scientific American or something. I don't remember I don't have the citation, but he said that he read somewhere that Jeff Bezos read the same article, and that article had a strong impact on both of them. He said, and I was the first faculty member on this campus, and I think almost every campus in the United States, to have my syllabus and all my course materials online on the web. Jeff Bezos read that article and started Amazon.com. But his innovation was no less useful and functional, and he became a dean, and he has since become president of another university, I understand. You take the small steps and you build on them. So, clarinetist, so let me get into the real innovation in technology. My goal was to become a clarinet player. And after my master's degree, my parents said, we've supported you enough now, it's time to get a job. And I ended up taking a job in the music library at the Hart School of Music in the University of Hartford, where I had done my degrees. And it was just going to be a means to an end to pay the rent while I took auditions and got a gig in an orchestra somewhere. And that coincided with the library's automating for the first time. So this was throwing out the card catalog, the old card catalog, real cards, and putting it online. And there was a guy leading it for the library system, and somebody in the music library needed to sort of be his contact and represent the music library on some of these issues and meetings. And that led to my discussion of technology and libraries and computers and music. And so it really started off very simply. And I guess I want to just say that aside from innovation, the real thing that I look back on that I think made this possible is I have a career of saying, yes, sure, I can do that. I like to say that I had a formal plan, and I really kind of did at one point. Like I said, get the degree and then take auditions and get a gig and move. But I was reminded of this quote that I had a different quote, and someone shared with me this morning, completely irrelevant of this, unrelated to this discussion. If I can find my, what did I do? Hang on. Keep in mind too that gotta move my windows around here. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? So I love this quote.
That's
Mike
so
Tyson
funny.
is probably not someone I should be emulating here, but nonetheless, it's whatever you have to remember that you're going to set out to do something, and it could take many different directions. And being open to those opportunities as they arise. The first time I got involved with technology, I was working in the library at Eastman, and Nathan may remember those days. He was a student at Eastman, apparently, much to my surprise, when he appeared on campus, and he reminded me that, yeah, I was in your music bibliography class. At Eastman, I used to end, which was sort of on recording industry, and that's me, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
On the recording industry, and this was again in the late 90s, I guess, at this point. And I used to have a slide that ended that said unprecedented opportunity, unprecedented peril. And it's true. It's the same. I mean, every one of these technologies that we can think about, you can do something really fantastic with it. But then you have to think about the consequences and what's possible, and that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we face today. And I know we're going to get to more today in a few minutes. But I'll just say it's having the appropriate staff always on hand to manage these. None of these projects are one and done kind of things where you build it and now you've done it and you can move on and just make money off of it, right? Everything requires continual maintenance and upgrade and security and all those kind of things. So anyway, now you've learned that firsthand.
Amazing. I mean, that's my first experience of being in a meeting that I had to suddenly, I don't know what, just like.
Yeah, I was scrambling, seeing is there anything I can do, but yeah, that was the only thing you could do, was really shut it down and
then reconfigure it.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about Phil. You reminded me when you showed the computer of old. The thing that I found so exciting about those days was like every month or every 3 months, something new was out there that everybody could try out. And there was like a certain proportion of people who would always want to try those things and test them out and get used to them. And then there were the others who were sort of waiting to adopt the technology, but waiting for other people to sort it out first.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who have become the most innovative over the past, 10, 15, 20 years are the people who just, went in and tried stuff out,
Yeah.
and I think that in many ways we're still living in a world in which trying stuff out leads to innovation.
I would agree, and I think the challenge, for the place like IU especially, is that I often joke. I realize I have lots of maxims and things that I refer to all the time. Um, you know, I've told Dean Richards multiple times, and he now repeats it. So I think that's probably a good thing. We can do anything. We can't do everything, and that's always the challenge, is right? Because we are now bombarded with options, and especially as we started looking at, what the last 2 weeks was bringing, where we said, okay, we think, we want to use Zoom for most of these, and then someone says, I hate Zoom, I prefer FaceTime, and I want to do Skype, and I want to, and that's all fine. I mean, so that's part of the problem. Back in those days, there were limited options, so there was kind of a new cool thing that Microsoft or Apple put out. There weren't a whole lot of players. And so you could say, yeah, you make that work for my purpose or not, or it's too expensive. Most of the time back in those days it was going to be too expensive, and you had a cost benefit analysis there. Now it's like the sky's the limit, and there are so many options that at a place like IU you have to factor in, is it scalable to an institution of our size, first of all, because a lot of things seem really sexy, and that's great if you're teaching, your small studio of students. That may be the perfect tool. Multiply it times 300 faculty members and 1,600 students at the Jacobs School, and suddenly you need support people and servers and all kinds of platforms and things that you have to manage. So, that's a big part of it. But I think, yes, we're still living in that world, but it's gotten really complicated because of the variety of platforms, people's preferences, iOS, Android, Macs, and PCs, and Linux, and just trying to come up with something that we can support and sustain over a period of time is always got to be part of the conversation.
And
So,
reading that into like one's personal life. I guess there's a lot of synthesizing that one has to do oneself about what am I going to do, TikTok? Am I going to do FaceTime? Am I going to do the? Am I going to adopt all these different technologies that are sort of exploding around me? And how do I prioritize the sorts of things that I believe I want to be doing for the
right.
purposes of my goals.
Right. And I think the other thing to consider in there is who your audience is. So, like, for whom are you innovating, and what's your purpose, right? I always joke at IU, we don't do technology for the sake of just for doing technology. Like, it has to fit into a bigger plan. And again, I refer to you, Mike Tyson, about our plans. But I attended a workshop several years ago where another maxim that came out of it is culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. And so, you can have a great strategic idea and how it's going to work at the institution, but if you're, like, for me, if it doesn't fit into the goals of the music school or the culture of IU and the way things are done at IU, it's not going to fly. Now, you might go somewhere else, and this may be the perfect thing. And I hear this a lot from faculty who come from other institutions and say, I was at this small place in the middle of Colorado, and we had this thing, and it worked great. And yeah, that probably did. That will never work here. And I go to conferences all the time, and there was one. I was actually invited to Apple several years ago. Sebastian Bashili and I went. And there was a big event on music in higher ed with Apple, and they had some presentations. And this one guy was from a very small school in Indiana, actually, and he was showing what they were doing with iPads and how this worked so great. And they were like, instead of Canvas, they had this little homegrown thing on the iPad, and they were sharing out all their materials. And I said, how many faculty do you have in your department? We have 9 music faculty members. And how many students? 40. And yeah, that's manageable there, but you know, to try and replicate that in a place like IU, it's not possible. So you have to keep in mind, I think, just your environment. So who are you trying to impact with this? And what's the culture there? Is that going to be something that's received well or not? You know, I came here from Eastman. I was referring to Nathan having been there at the same time. When I got to IU, I was shocked. IU has this culture of building software. In Rochester, at Eastman and the University of Rochester, I was on both campuses. There's very little software development, at least at the time. Maybe they've changed things now. But it was, you know, you buy stuff off the shelf, you make it work for your purpose, and you deal with it. Whereas here, you can develop custom applications, and that's sort of the expected thing. And so, you know, you have to sort of work within the culture that you're a part of, and do your best to make it work. So, I mean, I think that's something for everyone to think about and this could be a generational thing. You know, back when I was a student and just starting in my professional career, I was more inclined to sort of try and fit in, and rather than, you know, lead. And so I think there's a balance to be struck there when you're young and starting out. Although now, with the way the world has changed, I mean, I think, you know, many people are encouraged to really to come up with innovative ideas, and many people have made a lot of money doing this, and saying, I can show you how to do this. So it's again a balance. The situation you're in really matters, and what you're building it for, and who your intended audience is as well. Don't forget that you know, that culture issue plays both ways, and as relates to music, the oboe instructor when I was a student used to do these kind of pops concerts on Sunday afternoons he used to joke about the blue-haired ladies. And, you know, he would go to retirement homes, and he released a CD called Delightful Debussy, and these, you know, just kind of feel-good kind of things. And one of my best friends was an oboist in his studio, and he said, why do you do that? You should be, you know, teaching them about Bach and playing them great masterworks and, you know, exposing them to this kind of stuff. And he said, no, I'm going to play what they like, because first of all, I make them happy, and they pay me. And so, you know, there's an element of that you have to keep in mind, that your great ideas, and you might have a great idea for an innovation, but is it really going to have legs, depending on who you have available to consume it, and is that part of your thinking process? So I maybe
Yeah.
have gotten a little far afield. Should I go ahead?
Not at all. That's great. I wanted to just ask, invite Ben and Rob and Madeline if you had any thoughts or ideas or questions. You know, we've got a few other things that we want to talk about, but we want to make this as much a roundtable discussion as possible. So if there's anything that, you know, you're doing in terms of innovation that thematically connects to Phil's world, I don't know if you have any thoughts, any questions at this point.
After Zoom bombing, no one should be shy. I mean, what are you what are you going to say or do that's going to shock anybody at this point?
Well, as they think about that, Phil, how about taking us through? I know that the Jacob School of Music has embarked on a few major endeavors that sort of get into this technology innovation space over the past 10 years or so, and one of which was obviously the live streaming, the digital streaming. And that was, I mean, when you were doing it, it was like highly innovative. It was like people were trying things out for the first time. Take us through some of the processes that you went through. You know, what was your exploration in that field to begin with, and how did it end up?
Sure. You know, I have to give credit to Conrad Strauss, who, you know, is the chair of our audio engineering department. A lot of those initiatives really started with him as research projects, either in his area, in his department, or things that we collaborated on, which again is another thing to always keep in mind with innovation. While a lot of it happens, I mean, we all have this vision of like Steve Jobs in his garage, or, you know, Bill Gates developing Microsoft. It's rare that these things are done in isolation, and usually it requires a team of people. So keep that in mind too, that it's really important to have either people just to bounce ideas off of, or real experts where you don't have expertise to say, here's my idea and here's where I'm going. So before I get to the streaming, there was sort of a precursor to that, which was the the digital delivery of files. So, forever and a day we've been recording concerts at the Jacob School. Our earliest one that we know of is 1937. And so the library is full of every possible media that you can name since 1937 that was the recording medium of the day. Lots of analog tape. And so somewhere around 2007, Professor Strauss came to me and said, should we stop the madness here? We record stuff, we burn it to a CD, we deliver the CDs to the library. And of course, we were then looking at preservation as an issue. Like, we're going to have to digitize all this crap now. How are we going to get to that project? So we came up with an idea of a digital workflow, right? So with my head as my hat as director of IT combined with my hat as director of the library, this made a lot of sense, and I could kind of prioritize some resources. So we put some computers in the control rooms, and in a gross oversimplification, it's still kind of the case. At the end of the day, the recording engineers save some files and run some scripts that move them all around the campus, and the next thing you know, they're available in our what was then variations and now media collections online. To get there, though, so we said, there are people in the libraries who are doing digital library things, and UITS that have servers and networks and things. We should bring all these people together and see if we need a big project. And we did, and the consensus was, this is a fantastic idea. We love it. We'll be ready to really embark on this in about a year, maybe a year and a half. And because we need this piece of technology and this kind of a trusted digital repository. I remember they kept talking about that. There's, this was the white paper that was being written. This is the right way to do it, and we shouldn't try unless we have all those pieces in place. And Conrad and I kind of looked at each other at some point and said, well, they may be right, but let's give it a try and see what we can do. And every once in a while, we would check in with each other and say, we'd still be waiting if we hadn't done something. So again, it's the message there is trying something is better than researching and writing the white paper. I'm not saying you should go off half-cocked and just do something stupid and waste a lot of money. But sometimes, especially low-cost pilots are really worth their time. So this thing that we developed that then has blossomed into this system that we run that we hear from people all around the world who want to try and replicate really was something that wouldn't have come about had we not just tried it. And that was the way the variation system that was developed in the 90s was similarly came about. That when the music library as you guys know it today, of course, used to be in Sycamore and 3 different places actually. When they were moving into the current facility in 1995, the goal was not to have any audio equipment. Sorry. And to have it all be streamed over a computer network that was being installed. And as I understand it, they were told, are you out of your minds? This is, imagine in 1995, this was hardly on anyone's radar. And at the time, they weren't able to accomplish that. We still do have some audio equipment in the libraries, but this was really outlandish. And I know that there were several people who worked in the libraries when I got here who said, we argued tooth and nail, saying, do you know how much money you're spending on that stupid thing? How many CDs we could be buying for the library instead of doing that project? And yeah, I mean, I could hear that argument in 1995. But then you think about how it's been transformational in terms of how we do teaching and learning of music at IU and how others around the world are trying to replicate it in different ways now. So, I mean, there's a message there about also, giving it a try and proving concepts is good and demonstrating the value in a small way. And that's how you attract more interest and more, hopefully, funding, but also expertise to give you that little nugget of guidance to say, you're on the right track here, but have you thought about this other thing? And so the streaming, I will add too that again started in the audio department, but what was important there was I think what we've done to distinguish ourselves, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have an audio engineering department and we have experts who care about the quality of the sound, the quality of the video. One of the best things I heard in recent years was Dean Richards came back from a meeting and he said a dean from another institution that we compete with for students said, we were talking about instituting a big streaming project like what you've done, and we decided we're not going to do it because we couldn't replicate the quality that you guys have done at Indiana. And so, I mean, that really says something. But I think what's more important there is, again, it's the culture of the institution, right? There are tons of music schools around the country and around the world now who stick a camera at the back of a hall, have a wide shot of a stage and, a microphone or two, and they stream their concerts. and it's probably fine in many cases. We took a different route there, wanting to ensure some quality and trying to keep up with HD when HD was suddenly something that was going to be affordable for us in terms of video. And of course, the quality of the audio remains really good because we have audio engineering faculty and students paying attention to it. So, again, it's the culture of the institution, and that really came about initially as a means to, can we do it? And so once that was proven, okay, who's it for? And it was really initially for students and their parents and families, right? We're not trying to provide a service for the world, but now, each step sort of grows into a wider audience, and especially these days, is there a way we can exploit even further, that innovation so that we can maybe share a lot of our assets? I mean, we would be sharing it all if it weren't for copyright law and some policies that IU presents, being a state institution and a big bureaucracy. But you'll see coming soon, I hope, we'll have more public domain material that we'll be exposing for the world to consume.
Yeah, and I'm completely blown away by the quality of the live streaming coming out of, for instance, the opera productions and the orchestra performance and things like that. It's just it absolutely amazes me. In fact, sometimes I'll like go to the first half of an opera and then come home and watch the live stream of the second half, and actually appreciate the second half more because of the angles and the sort of the way that you're able to experience the opera using digital technology. And the other thing that I'm always struck by is how, if I walk past admissions, for instance, there's a huge screen that you have in admissions, and you see these glorious videos of what's going on in the Jacobs School of Music, which is an incredible representation of the quality and sort of ethos of the school. So my question to you is just a quick question. As the digital project has been developing, are you seeing any other types of relationships with the school? Are people connecting to the school in different ways? Is it starting to change the type of conversation that we have with the outside world?
In small ways, yes. I mean, I think, again, it was really the motivation behind it is just to share with faculty, with students and parents and families who couldn't be in Bloomington to see their students perform. But we've explored several things. Like there was a time when we had bloggers, musicology students who were, those of you who remember MTV back when they used to show videos on MTV, pop-up videos, remember that? So, there was kind of a commentary that the musicology students were providing as the opera was being streamed, and saying in this scene, Mozart intended for this, and the librettist wrote that, and initially it was controversial that because there was it was kind of a pain technologically. There were some issues there, but some of them, and I will point to a musicology faculty member who will remain nameless, who said, "That's the wrong thing. People should be, excuse me, people should be enjoying the opera and not distracted by that stuff." And it kind of came to a point where we said, this is a different experience. And that was what was innovative. That was where we could have innovation, right? If you want to watch a video of an opera, you can do that any number of ways. But where is there a chance to be transformational here? And I'll talk a minute, I think, about the difference between sort of digitization and digital transformation. And so that gave us an opportunity to kind of do something different. And there were audiences, I think, who, we don't have a lot of good data on this, and I can't really point to anything specific except for a couple of occasional comments that some people prefer to stay at home and watch, which is always, of course, a challenge with ticket sales, right? Is that going to be? But we don't think so, because those who want to have the experience of just being engulfed in consuming the opera as it was intended to be, like the musicologist said, get that. They can come to the hall and really experience it. Those who want that different experience, that transformational experience, have the opportunity to do that as well. And we know that there are some people who would just prefer to sit on their couch and make a bag of popcorn and enjoy it and not have to, and they enjoy it in a different way. So I would say that that's something, and we've since taken to,
so there's like the transformational aspect of technology, which you're hinting about, like the difference between, as you said, digitization and digital transformation, right?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time.
That sounds really interesting. Do you want to just touch base on that issue?
Yeah, sure. I spend a lot of time on that now in higher ed in general. Lots of conferences, not just in music schools, but in higher ed all across the world. Moving, and corporations, big business now, moving from this phase of digitization that I think we all experience, where you just take an analog thing and you make it digital, right? So that's kind of what the Variations project was initially. Rather than putting a record on a turntable, you click on a computer and you essentially have the same experience, but in a digital with digital technology in the middle of it. I mean, digitalization and digital transformation really brings something new, right? This is changing your business model essentially, because of things you can now do. Having these kind of those digitized things are a big part of that, and so I think that's where higher ed really has to be spending a lot of time. And I'm hoping we're going to learn a lot over the next 6 weeks, and as things have been forced to go online. Not that this is the ideal way to go into such an activity, but that notion of digital transformation, I think, is where we need to spend a lot of time, and a lot of innovation has to happen, because as the technology that you referred to earlier has become more and more ubiquitous, and there are all kinds of apps for this and apps for that, that's not where the crux of at least the work that I'm involved in, where the innovation is going to happen. It's how do you use those tools now to do something different. And one of the things that I've noticed in the first week, just in meetings I've been in, besides Zoom bombing, is the notion of the chat feature in Zoom, for example. That, I mean, I think about the student experience where, if you've been in a large lecture class, you have the people who kind of sit up in the front and the people who kind of sit in the back, and people who are more inclined to ask questions and people who are not of that type of personality that will ask questions in a large group. But I'm seeing people who are willing to type in the chat box questions, and that sort of safety of not having to speak out loud but to still ask my question and get it answered, and then get that positive reinforcement that, hey, Nathan had a really great question, let's talk about this. That has the potential to create a whole new way of teaching and learning that I'm wondering, there's part of me, it's too early to tell, but is there going to be a new model in 10, 15 years when you guys are all tenured faculty members? Will the norm be we're going to do a lot of Zoom kind of things, and occasionally we'll get together in a real space to do traditional academic work? I mean, teaching violin or something like that is a whole different ball of wax, but I wonder about that kind of transformation and what we're going to be able to glean from this period of time.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important point. And I'm sorry, I'm being sort of Zoom bombed by a leaf blower here. But I just want to quickly mention this thing here, obviously the iPhone, right? I mean, 15 years ago, this was a phone. Today, this is a computer. And what's happened is that because of the technology that's associated with a phone, it went through this morphing of, first of all, starting off as a phone and then becoming something in which the phone plays a very small role. And what's interesting to me about what's happening with technology and the music world and the cultural world right now is that, 20 years ago, 90% of what we did was on stage, pretty much emulating what was happening around us, repeating the great performances that were happening around us, and learning how to do that really well. And I think of that as sort of like as a tactical approach to success. Whereas in the past 20 years, more and more so now, these new modes, technology and different platforms and YouTube and the virtualization of what we do through performance, and and don't forget about the cross collaboration with other art forms and the interdisciplinarity of the arts. I mean, it's all just like blossoming into so many different avenues. The space that used to be occupied by the analog staged performance is changing and becoming something other than what it was 15, 20 years ago. And it reminds me of, for instance, the role of magazines or books. 25 years ago, 90% of the consumption of ideas was through magazines, books, newspapers, and the sort of the printed version of what we now consume. And now the magazines still exist. Books still exist, but in a very, very different part of the ecosystem. So can you talk a little bit about how you think within the Jacob School of Music, we're starting to wake up to the fact that we're entering into a world that is just completely different from the one that we used to be part of?
Sure. I think what's important for everyone to remember is that some of the greatest challenges to innovation is that argument about you're trying to replace the thing that I hold most dear. And in a school like ours, I was once stopped in the hallway by a faculty member who yelled at me and said I was a technocrat. I'm sick and tired of the technocrats like you dictating how I do what I do. And I think that's always going to be an element of, as we talk about these new modes that You're saying that a computer performance is better than the live performance, and I think what we have to be really clear about is it's not A or B. It's not like either you're an advocate for, and like so much of our world today, where you have one extreme or the other, and if you're in one, you're hated by the other. We have to seek out the ways that both coexist, and that one is different than the other. And there's still opportunity, right? We still have books. The library still buys lots of them. I can tell you, we spend a lot of money on books and printed scores. I could easily say you all should be using this app that has all of these PDFs of scores on them, and we don't buy anymore. I don't see that happening in my tenure at the Jacob School. I imagine the person who succeeds me will likely have to deal with that issue someday. But so I think that's something that we always have to keep in mind when we think about what we do as musicians. There's always going to be something special about being in the room with the performer and experiencing that live firsthand. But that doesn't mean that digital things are not still as exciting, or in some cases more exciting, and how can we exploit them in ways that are really innovative. I had a really good thought that just left my head. One of the things that we're looking at, of course, is online delivery of courses through platforms like edX, and IU has a lot of online opportunities to teach classes online to people who are distant. And Dean Richards likes to talk about new audiences and getting out of our cultural caves that we have, and presenting ourselves to different groups, different constituencies who might not ever want to walk into the Musical Arts Center, but they might check something out online that is approachable and interesting. So I think targeting things like that that could have a great impact are important. I think a lot of what we do at the Jacob School, we still do in that mode of protecting what we've always done. And I think we have to start thinking differently about that. And I think it involves different types of music, and not making the distinction that all of the Western art music and jazz, which I imagine there was a time when, and if you ever heard David Baker speak, right, then thought that jazz would be part of the canon of what we taught at a school like ours. Nathan was at Eastman. There are stories about Chuck Mangione in the 1970s having Howard Hanson throwing him out, that this would never be taught at a school like this.
That's funny.
So I think if there's an opportunity to start engaging new audiences with technology that we're looking at with the Jacob School. Let me look at my notes here, because I thought I had made a note about that and it left my brain, and it's frustrating me that I don't remember. I think one of the other thoughts when you held up your phone, what I was going to mention is what we teach and the way we teach it, I think, has really changed or needs to change. Most of you who have gone through the curriculum have probably experienced a listening exam, right? We used to call them drop the needle quizzes, and then variations. We used to have a tool where you could test yourself. What is education still going to require the same kind of fact-based knowledge, right? Because you think about that phone in your pocket. Yeah, I guess it's helpful to know that Beethoven was born in 1770 and he died in 1827, right? 1827. I wrote that down, make sure I didn't screw it up. Right? Are those facts when you have all of this on your phone? There was a piece of music earlier that I saw in a video that a group in Italy made to honor the medical people in Italy and what they're dealing right now, and I was like, I don't know that piece. And it was Nabucco. It was Verdi's Nabucco. It was a chorus from that. All I did was hold my phone up and press, and I say, Siri, what am I listening to? And she's going to answer now. Yeah. And I was able to find out, right? Maybe that was a failing in my music education when we did Verdi, and I didn't remember that excerpt that I probably should know. But, I think we have to think about what is it that we need to be teaching, because if you can get all that in your pocket, like, why are we going to teach kids to learn their multiplication tables anymore when I can easily ask my phone, what's 7 times 9? Yeah, we should probably know basics of things, right? Old school people are going to come down on me for suggesting these things, but we really have to think about what's important now that you have all of this information in your pocket. What do you need to have in your brain when you have all of these other things in your pocket? And what can you be focusing on that's different than that is exciting and brings new learning and new aesthetics to the world?
Yeah, and I think of that a lot as well. This whole idea of what are we doing to create value around us? What are we doing to create something that's actually meaningful, rather than just simply repeating the past? And I think you've spoken a lot about this tension between the habits of the past, the legacy of the legacy part of the world that we're part of, and the fact that we're entering into a new era in which the variables of of what we do as cultural beings is just completely shifting. It's completely different from what it was before. So, we've got some pretty talented people who are listening to this as well. Ben, I know that you've been listening all the way through. I don't know if you're still there, and if you want to jump on board and just talk about some of the things that perhaps you've resonated with through this conversation about what, you're living a very innovative career in which you're utilizing a lot of new tools around you. What are your thoughts about innovation these days?
You're muted.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean all of it resonates with me, first of all. I mean, I can see applications for everything we've discussed here and more, but honestly, over the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've just been playing catch up a lot on things that I hadn't had interest in before, such as teaching music theory classes online and doing ear training and sight singing. Yeah, I got my first session of that today, so I'm
And how's that going? Are you enjoying it? Are you realizing that there's a lot of cool stuff out there that you weren't doing before, or is it, what's your general feeling about that?
all of the above. I mean, it's been really overwhelming and big change and a lot of learning, but honestly, a lot of stuff that I had put off learning in favor of other things. So just, yeah, that's kind of how it's been going.
See,
It's been really
that's what
stressful, but really interesting, you know?
I think this is what is going to be the most exciting thing that comes out of this period. And we hopefully we're starting to talk about the silver linings in some of this, right? We're going to get to that point, I hope. In a couple of
Go
weeks.
ahead. Let's switch into it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, when we look back on this, when I mentioned about doing small things that are innovative to try and build upon, everyone is going to learn, that it's perhaps not so bad, that there are people who I think, especially among our older faculty, would think, I would never teach an online class. But a lot of it's based in that fear, back to Jeff Nelson, right? That I don't feel comfortable with computers, or, I'm good at, you go to your comfort zone. I'm good at this, what I do, and I've been doing it for so long now, and the thought of reaching out into that area is scary. Well, now people are being forced to do it, and I think there are going to be some of them that will come out and say, that wasn't so hard, and I can do that. And now you have really smart people that might be able to apply things that will take us into new, it's important that we have all the diversity of experiences and viewpoints, because young people might be really good with the technology, but they might not always have the life experience to bring to some of these issues, or the pedagogical experience. We learned today. We probably want to set up these meetings a little differently. And so it's always a matter of experience. The experiential part of what we do is really important. So I really think there's that. I want to just add, though, about what Ben and others are dealing with. We're doing online learning in a probably not very good way. And I've expressed to everyone that I've had to come in contact with in the last couple of weeks, you're not expected to become a really good online teacher. If we were going to do this, we would send people to training, and we'd have lots of technology, instructional designers working with faculty and teachers about what the best practices are and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to share my screen, Alan. I'm so desperate to share this clip, so I'm going to do it.
Waiting. Yeah.
So, when this started a little over 3 weeks ago, when it became clear that this was going to become a reality, I mean, nothing had been announced yet, but I was pretty sure that we were headed down a path. And so when I went into I sent an email, and I said to the IT staff, who's small, by the way, small but powerful, I said, we need to have an emergency meeting this afternoon. And so we got everybody in the room, and it was reminded of this clip. Now, those of you on this are probably all too young to remember. My screens have changed since the Zoom bomb. I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen, but we'll figure it out. 1995, there was a movie called Apollo 13. Tom Hanks, Houston, we have a problem. And there's a moment in there that I always remember where something happens. They were, 3/4 of the way to the moon, and the carbon dioxide filters were having a problem, and they were going to all suffocate, and if they didn't figure something out. So I'm reminded of this clip, and this is sort of where we were a couple of weeks ago about, hey, everybody's going to teach online soon.
Hey, Phil, can you share the sound?
I thought I was.
Yeah, I can hear the sound. It's just a little suck.
Well, essentially, he said, we got to make that square thing fit into the round thing, or they're all going to die. And that's kind of how we felt a couple of weeks ago when it became clear that we were going to have to explain to some faculty who have been teaching at the Jacob School for 30, 40 years that they're going to have to sit in front of a computer screen and do it. So how is that going to work? And, necessity is the mother of invention. Sometimes the greatest innovation just comes out of we're going to make the best of this situation. And I think that's what we're experiencing now. And hopefully we'll learn a lot about how not to do certain things for sure. But I think there's a freedom here that I think we're going to experience soon. Now that people are starting to settle in a little bit, and there's a lot of scared people right now about, oh my God, what if this doesn't work? But I think what we're going to find is that people will be opened up to new ideas, and I think we're going to have a lot of innovation come out of this from places that maybe we weren't expecting. So that's at least my hope.
Yeah, that's great. That's right. I love that clip. That's just totally hilarious.
Well,
Madeline, do you have any thoughts about what's going on in your life in terms of just adopting and adapting to this new reality around you? How is it going for you?
Yeah, so I'm a student at IU. I'm a music ed student. I'm finding that my education is becoming a lot more individualized on my part, because there's less of a culture and a community that you can rely on. Just in everyday kind of interactions and things like that. So it's definitely changing how I'm approaching my education, because it's just me sitting in my bedroom all day doing online classes and practicing and things like that. So I do wonder, though, when we go back, hopefully in the fall, if things will be much, much different in terms of the community and our perspective on our education, but also our classes. And maybe I think we will learn that some things are more efficient online than meeting in person X amount of times a week. So I think it will be interesting to see what changes when we go back in the fall.
yeah. Do you think that you're enjoying the personalization part of this, that you're able to sort of craft your own direction?
Yes and no. I got a lot of value from talking to my music ed friends about what we were hoping to achieve with our classes and the kind of programs that we would have in the future. So that part I do really miss for sure. But you can still talk to people, and there are group chats and things like that. But it is just a very different kind of education.
See that? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a quick question for you, Madeline. Do you find that you're exploring different things now than you were before? In other words, are there things that are sort of opening up to you in terms of what you see in the world of music that are different from what you were seeing before?
Yeah, so in one of my classes, our curriculum has been changed around. So instead of visiting programs in the community, which obviously is not possible anymore, we're going to kind of create digital packages in a way and send those to the kids that would be participating in those programs but can't anymore. And we haven't started that project quite yet, but it's going to entail something of videotaping yourself teaching a concept, or providing some sort of digital exercise for them to do at home. And I feel like that can certainly be used after all of this is over as well. I feel like that could be applied in many ways.
So
That's
here's
very
an
cool.
idea that really excites me, because when we talk about innovation, one of the things that we've been trying to do is build upon what we've done with the IU Music Live streaming, right? So like I said, we have the streaming, we do the a little bit of academic stuff related to it now, but we've been talking about, is there a way to package some of this for schools, or but we need some music ed help there, right? We need someone essentially like a music appreciation type of lecture, or not maybe lecture, but materials to go along with the students, and then now watch Friday night at 8 o'clock and watch the actual performance. And we think whether it's for schools or for the people at Meadowwood, or any number of audiences, how do we build that, and who do we need to have involved? So you're going to be having lots of experience that maybe we can easily put this together, or more easily certainly put it together after you've had this experience this year. So already, those kind of things are exciting for me, that you'll be less, you'll be more comfortable engaging in that kind of thing than you might have otherwise. So let's hope.
I think the question comes, how can you create something and make a meaningful experience through those digital exercises and things like that? So I
Oh, that's
think it'll be
fascinating.
difficult, but not quite as difficult as we think. I think the material can still be very meaningful.
Yeah.
Nathan, I know that you've been watching through the conversation, and I'm just wondering if there are any thoughts. We've got a few minutes here at the end, but since you're a member of the entrepreneurship team, I was just wondering if you were thinking of how the world that we're living in right now is revealing so many innovation opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the way that the world has completely gone online and how classical music is just like bursting into this vibrant online community with online streaming and online concerts and everybody reaching out, all of the philanthropy that's going on, and it's all digital and it's all online, and it's the people that are reacting to it immediately that I think are the most fascinating ones to follow. But I'm curious to know with Phil, like in the next 5 to 30 years, like could you see 30 years in the future, maybe, but even 5 years based on, okay, say this sets forward a new trend that we're all going to be living in sort of, if not a complete virtual reality, like let's say a 50-50 split. How like what kind of things are you guys working on to like sort of adapt to that? And I'd be curious to know like where are we going?
Well, I mean, you know, when you've been in IT long enough, you realize it's kind of foolish to try and predict too far out. I mean, there was a point in time a few years ago where I used to say, you know, 3 years ago, we could never have predicted the iPad would be something that anybody would care about. And now look, everybody in the room has one now. So there's always that caveat that, I mean, 30 years, I wouldn't even pretend to be able to guess 30 years, right? Except, I mean, I think that we always have to think about the big principles, right? I'm going to go back to that culture thing, right? Will there still be a need for higher education in 30 years? For sure. Will people still care about learning? And I think there's going to be a way to do it. Now, automated AI and, all this kind of machine learning and stuff like that. Will there be more of that going on? Probably. And I think, some people find that to be threatening, but I think there's, back to my comment about what do you need to have in your pocket versus what you need to have in your brain, in a way that can be liberating, that you can focus on, that the future people who are going to be teaching and performing can focus on the things that they can uniquely do, and bring that expressive part that I don't see coming anytime soon. So, where you can make the connection between the audience member, right? So, the computer doesn't know that the blue-haired lady has a different aesthetic than the college student, and this kind of audience that might be more interested in this type of music versus that type of music. So, how do you customize your repertoire and the way you play and the instrumentation of your ensemble? Really will be where you see yourself going with your music versus technology. I want to back people off from this notion that technology is going to dominate everything, and we're going to have computers creating songs and performing them, and it's all going to be great. And I don't see that, but I think there's always going to be this. I think we should always look to how do we take the best advantage of what's available to us to free us from the crap that we don't want to have to deal with, to do the thing that we really care about the most. Because it's, as you all know, when you do the thing that you're passionate about, that's when you make the greatest progress, right? And you really shine. So, where's it going? I think this kind of thing is going to become more prevalent. We're going to see more of the choice of an online thing versus an in-person thing, and people maybe doing a little bit of both. I often wonder if there's a time coming in the Musical Arts Center where there'll be big screens in the lobby where people can consume the opera on the big screen while they're eating and drinking. Kind of it's a similar experience, right? People still want to get out and be seen and do things, but maybe not go sit passively and afraid to make a noise. So I think we're going to see more opportunities like that come about, but they'll be kind of targeted to specific audiences. I think. I mean, that's the best I can do in the next couple of years. I don't know.
Cool. Thanks.
Can I piggyback on that for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm Rob. I was at IU from 98 to 2002, 2003 as a music ed major, actually, Madeline. And so it's good to see you all. And I was
It's really great to have you with us. It really is. Yeah, yeah.
And I spent many hours in the music library on variations, so it's good to hear a little bit of the backstory there. But now these days I spend a lot of my time thinking about the rooms that we perform music in, and working as an acoustics consultant with architects quite often, trying to get the rooms to be as intimate as possible, because it's really the experience in the room that we really want to go for when it's all about the music, and then sort of the digital technology around that. Digital seems to make it accessible, just like we're able to have a conversation right now, whereas we wouldn't have been able to before, or in that conversation like this scales, we could have a lot of people here too, and a lot of people could be participating in the performance. But I sure hope that the small intimate performance that we all love being a part of in recital halls and so on, that continues to be part of the height of experiential music.
You know, that's an interesting point. One of in the 2 weeks that we've been preparing for online teaching, the number one complaint I probably got is the quality of the sound. And Zoom doesn't do this well, and I prefer FaceTime, and everybody's got their preferred way of doing it. And I keep just saying, I don't care, do whatever you want, whatever works for you at this point is good. But Zoom, for example, has the opportunity to turn off all of the processing it does. It kind of munges everything into the middle. It gets rid of all the highs and the lows and keep from feedback and distortion and all that kind of stuff. And there's a way to turn all that off if you want to manage the audio settings. And I think that we're all going to need to get closer to our audio engineering friends and understand these issues better about where your microphones are and where your speakers are and what you're listening through, because that I've said this many times. People say, "Oh, this doesn't sound very good," but they're listening on the Apple earbuds that came with their phone. And how do you know, right? There's so many complicating factors in this that I think that we're going to develop a new aesthetic around listening that is going to be interesting to suss out.
Maybe so. I hope so. MP3 doesn't seem to have instilled that in people. That quality.
No, I know, and I'm on both sides of that, because on the one hand, I like the technology, right, and it's the same thing. It's always the same thing. It's going to be a trade-off of the access. Having a version of it available on your phone is fantastic, right? That you can actually hear the song. But if you really want to do critical listening, you probably want to think about headphones or not an MP3, right? And the delivery mechanism. And I think it's important that we all understand the difference. That's, I think, what's important. And so you can make the choice. Yeah, I'm going to listen to an MP3, and I know that I'm perhaps not hearing everything I should be hearing, but it's okay in this case.
Pretty good.
Other cases, not. So, but yeah, I agree with you. I think our listening in the halls, especially, is really crucial, that people understand what they're getting when they're in those spaces, and we continue to build them. Have you been back to our hall since the renovation? Whenever that was. When was that, Atlanta? 2006, 2007?
5 years ago, yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
No, so I was there when I arrived in '98. They had just finished completion. I guess the first time around, I hadn't realized it.
So there was some acoustical work done in there. So
okay.
So they fixed some things, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think that we're past the hour now. I want to first of all, Phil, I just want to thank you for bearing with us as we made it through the Zoom bombing. It's like I have these various experiences in life, and I can now tell people that I've been Zoom bombed. So that's great. I'm glad that it happened on your watch.
When you save the video, maybe you should save both versions. The unedited, the director's cut, and so we can. I mean, actually, I'm kind of serious. I would be interested to have an example
just to see how that all happened. Yeah,
yeah,
unbelievable.
So,
and so thank you, and I want to thank everybody who was able to jump back on and stay with us through the hour. This is a really important conversation, a really great conversation to have with you, Phil. And it's just so wonderful to have you as part of the kickoff, of this series of conversations that we're going to be having every Friday. We're going to be announcing on Monday who our next Friday guest is, and we'll just go from there. So I just wanted to thank Rob and Madeline and Nathan and Phil and who else? Ben, for being part of the conversation. And Rob, yep, for being part of the conversation. And we'll see you all again sometime soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And for all of you, please know that my contact information, I'm sure, is somewhere. You are more than welcome to email me or call me. And if you have questions or ideas, I'm more than happy to continue a conversation in another way later, if that would be of any use to you. But thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking with you all.
And Rob, it's great to see you as well. Really great that you were able to get into this conversation.
Great. No, it's glad that you hosted it. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. See you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.